Congressman, what's your view of the Rostenkowski tax reform plan recently introduced by the House Ways and Means Committee?
Well, first let me say that we definitely need tax reform in this country. But I don't believe the Rostenkowski bill represents tax reform. In looking at a bill that I would vote for, I would look for three important things. One, fairness. Two, simplicity. And three, a bill that had an economic model. Let me start with the last. It seems to me that at a time when this country and the world is loaded with debt, we need a model for economic growth. We have the highest international debt in history. We're actually lending some countries just enough to pay us back the interest, so we don't have to write these loans down on the books. We know that the domestic debt is now pushing $2 trillion, and I've said before, that's the good news. You can't believe what's off the books in this country. Consumer debt is at an all-time high. The credit cards are coming in over the transom in people's homes, and we've got the issue of corporate debt on the takeovers. Now, to service this debt, we need earnings. We need growth. We've come off of 3 years of great growth. This year should be okay. How do we know that next year we're not going to have growth? Well, I believe this tax bill does not represent a model for economic growth, and if we pass it, I'm afraid that we could have a downturn, and that could cause a real problem for us. We need a bill that creates the growth to service that debt and to create jobs. Getting to another point, it's certainly not simple. The Rostenkowski tax bill is over 1,300 pages long, and that's just the code. By the time they write the regulations, you'll be talking about thousands of pages. So I don't see it as that. In terms of fairness, I don't know. It seems to me that we could have had a fairer tax statute. Certainly, we want to see everyone pay their fair share of tax. And I like the idea of every corporation and every individual paying some tax. But I don't think that the bill goes far enough. So I would say that the Rostenkowski tax bill is one that I could not vote for, and it's being routinely referred to here in Washington as not tax reform, but tax deform.
Wasn't this a great victory for New York because of keeping the state and local deduction?
Well, that was the good news, that we were able to keep the state and local tax deduction. But it seems to me that New York needs real tax reform, because we need a tax bill that's going to encourage the economic growth that I referred to before, so that we don't damage the economic base in New York State. So I would say that it's important for us to look for a tax bill that provides the jobs and that keeps the people in New York State. One of the things that I'm concerned about is that they've raised the alternative minimum tax from 20% to 25%. And while that may be good for many reasons, there are many people in New York State that pay on that basis, and you cannot deduct state and local taxes against that way of paying the taxes. And I've got to look at that more carefully. So while there's some good news for New York State in that we can, if this bill ever passed, God forbid, we could have the deductibility of state and local taxes, I see some other things that are much less subtle here, or much more subtle, that we have to look at before I'm comfortable that this is a bill I can live with as a congressman representing a district in New York State.
Well, you just introduced a bill in Congress to stop the Pentagon from being able to use inflation adjustments to hide billions of dollars from the taxpayers. Could you give a little background on the bill and discuss the legislation?
Well, many months ago when Secretary Weinberger was trying to convince us that we needed a lot more money for the Pentagon budget, and mind you that I want to see a strong defense but not a spendthrift defense, when he was under some great heat, he volunteered one day at a Republican conference that they had found $4 billion of money that the Pentagon had not yet thought it had. I guess that was a cause for celebration for many, but I asked the question to the Secretary. I said, Secretary, how can we have an accounting system where $4 billion can just pop right up like that? And I was concerned that it could be more than $4 billion. And I then called the Comptroller General of the United States, Chuck Bowsher, and after discussions with the Comptroller General and Senator D'Amato, the Comptroller General then started a study to see what the problem was. And I guess you saw in the papers several months ago that the amount was not $4 billion, but $37 billion. Now, you might ask yourself, how could this happen? Well, we found, after looking at this, and my staff spent a lot of time researching this issue, that the Pentagon uses a different basis for estimating inflation than the other departments. They take the inflation that everybody else uses, but then they tack on 30%. So what has happened in the past 3 years is that inflation has been coming down, and the 30% caused an amount of money to be left in the accounts of the Pentagon. Actually, it's called authority because they did not yet receive the money, but they were just about to. It left an amount of money in authority that they could not spend, but obviously would try to spend over the next 5 years. My bill, a bill that I'm now presenting to Congress, would force the Pentagon to project its needs, its procurement needs, on the same basis as every other agency, to estimate inflation as we all do, and not have this bonus of 30%. I think it's about time that we brought the government into the same world that we live in as private people, or that you live in as private citizens who have businesses, and certainly the Pentagon should be keeping its books on the same basis that the other government agencies do.